Welcome to Make Your Money Matter with Brad Barrett, the show that aims to change the way you think about wealth management. Brad is a financial advisor, established radio host, and author of Retire Right. He is a managing director and partner at One Capital Management, an SEC-registered investment advisory firm managing over $4 billion for clients across the nation. Brad and his team are dedicated to helping clients protect and preserve their assets so they can reach their investment and retirement goals. And now, your host of Make Your Money Matter, Brad Barrett.
Welcome in to Make Your Money Matter. I'm your host, Brad Barrett. I'm also a managing director and partner here at One Capital Management. Today on the show, we're going to talk about a story of old. We're going to talk about whether it's a greedy innkeeper or a generous capitalist. Because this time of the year, for many, we're celebrating a story that we've known for a long time, and there's different perspectives on it. I think it's important as we relate things to our money and realize that the world we live in, whether we like it or not, can be subjective. We're going to talk about that today. But before we get started, make sure you go to our website at onecapital.com. You can download and subscribe to our podcast. You can also download the podcast on any other platform, whether it's Google Podcast, the Apple iTunes app on your phone, or SoundCloud, or Spotify. And do me a favor, maybe this is a good thing before the end of the year. If you don't mind, leave us a message, leave us a review. It helps us share the message. I ask each one of you each week that. I'd really appreciate that. And I am so grateful. I want to say this before we start our show today. I'm so grateful each week to see all the listeners, all the comments, all the emails and the feedback. It really does make my heart just fill up. And I just love doing this for everybody. And I hope the content's great. I also really enjoy the feedback because it helps me create better content for you. So please, a review and a feedback really helps. And with that, let's get started. So as I mentioned at the top of the show, this season that we're in right now, the week before Christmas, it's really a story of old, right? The Bible story of the virgin birth really is at the center of much of the holiday cheer right around this time. And the book of Luke tells us that Mary and Joseph, Jesus' parents, traveled to Bethlehem because at that time, so I want to bring some context, as always, Caesar Augustus decreed a census should be taken. So Mary had to basically go and leave, and she gave birth after arriving in Bethlehem and placed baby Jesus in a manger, as we know, because there was what? No room for them in the inn. Now, some people, I think, if you go through the story here, whether it's biblical, sermon, or just informational, right? Some people think that Mary and Joseph might have been mistreated by a greedy innkeeper, maybe who only cared about profits and decided the couple was not, quote unquote, worth his normal accommodations. Now, this version of the story or narrative has been repeated, I think, many times in different plays and skits and sermons, in fact, and it fits what I'll call, and bring it into the money world, an anti-capitalistic mentality that really paints what? It paints business owners as greedy or maybe even evil. Now, it persists even though the Bible records no complaints and there was apparently no charge for the stable, which I find kind of interesting. Now, it may be the stable was the only place available. I mean, Bethlehem was overcrowded with people forced to return to their ancestral home for a census. Again, this was ordered by the Romans for the purpose of what, friends? Like old governments, it was for the purpose of levying taxes. Separate manner, separate discussion. I digress. But if there was a problem, it was likely due to unintended consequences of government policy. We're seeing that today, friends. And now in this narrative, right, the government caused the problem. Now, the innkeeper, in my opinion, I think for many, was actually generous to a fault. A hero, even, dare I say. I mean, he was overbooked, but he charitably offered his stable a facility he built with, really, obviously, at that time, as we all know, unknowing foresight. But the innkeeper was willing and able, which I think is really important, friends. If we're willing and able in life, we can do things. He was willing and able to offer this facility even as government officials who ordered and administered the census slept in their own beds with little care for the well-being of those who had to travel regardless of their difficult life circumstances. Now, if you must find quote-unquote evil in either of these narratives I just mentioned, remember that evil is ultimately perpetrated by individuals, not the institutions in which they operate. And this, I think, is why it's important to favor, as always, economic and political systems that limit the use and abuse of power over others. Now, I'll never on this show, because I don't have the luxury of being an advisor for nearly 2 decades, of getting overly political, but I do stand very firm on the design at which all governments are there to protect the people, not run their lives. And in the story of baby Jesus, which is the reason why we celebrate this season for many of us, a government law that requires innkeepers to always, let's say, have extra rooms or to take anyone who asked would people logically would just say, oh, that would fix the problem. But these laws would also have unintended consequences. Think about it. Fewer investors would back hotels because the cost of the regulations would reduce returns on investment. It trickles down to all of us. Or a hotel big enough to handle the rare census would be way too big in normal times. Even a bed and breakfast, if you will, would likely face the potential of being sued or something like that. I mean, there would be fewer hotel rooms, prices would rise, and innkeepers would once again be called what? Greedy. And if history is our guide, which is why I'm bringing this up today, government would chastise them for price gouging and then try to what? Regulate prices. I mean, it's a revolving cycle here. I mean, this does not mean, by the way, free markets are perfect or create utopia. They aren't and they don't. Far from it. But businesses can't force you to buy a service or product. You, all of us, we have a choice, even if it's not exactly what you want. And good business people try to make you happy in creative, industrious ways. We call this marketing, right? But government doesn't always care. Fun fact for everybody. In fact, if you happen to live in, say, North Korea or Cuba and are not happy about the way things are going, you can't really leave. And just in case you try, armed guards will help you think things through nicely. We are very fortunate, friends, to live where we live. We know this. We don't take it for granted. We celebrate it. And I want all of us to be able to do that heading into next year. With all of our differences, all of our cultures, everything we have going on, love will always conquer everything. Regardless of your belief system, it matters. And yes, all the way down to things like your money, stuff we talk about every week on our show. I talk about it every day with our clients because money is a tool. It doesn't make you happy. It provides you choices. What you choose to do with it, where your heart lies with it, is ultimately how you would define success with your money. And I think this is why the framers of our wonderful U.S. Constitution made sure there were what? Checks and balances in our system of government. I mean, these checks and balances, by the way, they don't always lead to good outcomes, friends. And we can think of many times when some wanted to ignore these safeguards, but over time, the checks and balances help prevent the kinds of despotism we've seen develop elsewhere in our world. So neither free market capitalism nor the checks and balances of the Constitution are the equivalent of having, say, a true savior, but they should give us all hope that the future will be brighter than many seem to think.
Stay connected. Get frequent updates on the show. Follow Brad Barrett and Make Your Money Matter on most social media platforms. And catch full episodes of Make Your Money Matter streaming now on our YouTube channel. To schedule your no-obligation appointment, go to onecapital.com or call 805-410-5454.
And as we head into the new year, here in about a week, I think the biggest thing for many people, as we especially get into January and we start talking about the new year, new you, right? It is important. It's a great reset. It's a perfect time to tackle those things that you've wanted to tackle. Maybe with your money, right? Getting your investments in order, getting your debt paid down, working through your savings, getting your budget in line, whatever it might be, it's important. And it's a great time to do it. That's why we have New Year's resolutions. But I've always said this, and I heard it a long time ago, and I'm not exactly sure where I heard it from, but it always stuck with me. You can take a lot away from a person, but you can't take away hope. If you take away hope, you've taken away everything. And so when you read those words, when you listen to this, right, all of these things I mentioned today, right, it allows us hope that the future will be brighter. That's what we need. And there's a lot of turmoil going on, as we know, especially we're on the eve, if you will, of heading into an election year. And in my career, I've seen 4 of them now. This will be my 5th one. Maybe it's 3, maybe it's 4. I got to count it. I don't even know at this point. But it's interesting to think about all the different iterations. I've seen Democrats, I've seen Republicans, I've seen incumbents, I've seen new people. We've seen a tumultuous one. We've seen a lot of stuff happen in the past couple of years in particular. So I know this is on the hearts and minds of everybody listening today. And I just wanted to share with you, look, positivity helps sometimes. I'm obviously well aware there's a lot of things going on, a lot of wrong happening. But hope matters. Just like your money matters, hope matters. And I think as we take that away from everybody, or we take that away from ourselves sometimes, but not even realizing it, right? We're watching things, we're heading down a rabbit hole of, news cycles and bad things going on, that we forget that there's actually good going on. There's hope still in the world. And so I want everyone just to head into the holidays, enjoy your time with your loved ones, be grateful that we have what we have. A lot of times, as it's well said, that, comparison is always the thief of joy. And I think as we talk about the joyous season that we are in, it's hard sometimes for many people. In fact, I was talking last week with somebody and they were saying, it's just hard to find joy. And joy is very different than happiness. And understanding the difference, because happiness is an emotion that we feel. Hope is a decision that we choose. And that was said actually by my pastor, Jim Cruz, which I really loved how he said it. And I think for all of us going into next year, I think that's a good choice for all of us to make. And the decisions that we make, because a lot of the success of our money comes from the habits that we form. And if you're sitting here listening, and go, I've gone astray for some things. I've overspent, or I've gotten myself into debt, or I pulled back on my investments because I thought the markets were too volatile, so on and so forth. Find that person to build trust in and find that plan that you can create. Because a lot like what we see in this world, even from a perspective, as I brought up at the top of the show, around this story of old, is it a greedy innkeeper or a generous capitalist? The world we live in, friends, is subjective. We get to choose, though, of who we get to listen to and where our hope lies. And so I think as we talk about all the bad that's going on, focus sometimes on the good, and it'll help you get, and I think attain, some of the goals and objectives you have with everything, but particularly with your money. Because if you keep avoiding it, it's never going to grow. It's never going to invest for yourself. And you're going to be stuck in this rat race as you might be in right now. So with that, I want to sign off for the year. I want to thank everybody for listening to our show each week. I'm excited to bring some great content and some great shows to you next year. Enjoy the holidays. Merry Christmas, happy holidays, and Happy New Year. And again, as always, thank you for listening to the Make Your Money Matter show. And before acting on anything discussed, make sure to speak with a financial advisor near you about your specific situation. Or again, if you'd like our help, you can reach us at 805-410-5454, or you're on our website at onecapital.com. And until next time, always remember to make your money matter.
The information in this show is educational and general in nature and does not take into consideration a listener's personal circumstances. Therefore, it is not intended to be a substitute for specific individualized financial, legal, or tax advice. To determine which strategies or investments may be suitable for you, consult the appropriate qualified professional prior to making a final decision.